Hi, my name is Steve Angrisano, and I want to talk to you about one of the most important things in all of our lives. What is it? Well, let me ask you like this. Think about the most fun and exciting thing you can imagine doing. What would it be? Where would you go? With who? Well, for me, it's a pretty easy answer. I'd be sitting with my two sons in the front row, right over the dugout of our favorite baseball team on the night they win the World Series. I can just imagine jumping up and down and high-fiving and pumping and screaming and dancing around when they win. It would be awesome. So take a second and be specific with your answer. Really imagine, what would it be? Where would you go? What are the sights, the sounds, the smells? Really get it in your mind. Now, I have no idea what you imagined or where it was, but I can tell you something I'm almost certain of. I'll bet wherever it was and whatever you did, you were not there all by yourself. Now, our friends are one of the most important things in our life. In fact, it's very hard for me to imagine enjoying life very much without any friends. In many ways, our friends tell us who we are now, and in many ways, they also shape us into who we're going to be. Today, we're going to take a closer look at who our friends are, why we choose the friends we do, and what an important decision that is for our life. I want to take a look at 3 questions today when we talk about friends. Who are your friends? Why did you choose them? And do they lead you closer to or further away from God? Let's look at the first 2 questions. Who are your friends? I'm pretty sure that's a question you won't have any trouble answering. It's not one we usually have trouble knowing. Who do we spend time with? Who are the people that we have the most fun with? Who can we count on? The second question is a little tougher. Why did you choose them? Maybe you share a common interest in music or movies. Maybe you're on the same team together or in band or something like that, which also gives us some common goals, and that can be a good thing. In fact, a very famous Greek philosopher named Aristotle defined 3 types of friendships. Friendships of utility are friendships that exist because friends desire or need something from each other. An example of that would be friends that are doing a class project together, or maybe someone you know from work. The second he called friendships of pleasure. These are friendships that exist because the friends feel good about a contribution that they're making in each other's lives. Think of something, say, a friendship that exists between people on the same sports team, or people in the same club at school, or maybe, like I said before as an example, people who really sit together at lunch because they love the same movies. We enjoy sharing those things with other people. The last category Aristotle called friendships of virtue. The most important type of friendship, according to Aristotle, is a friendship which exists to lead one another towards a more virtuous life. It's important to remember that none of these are bad. In fact, many friendships of pleasure and utility bring a lot of joy into our lives, and in some ways, they definitely help us to be better people. But the biggest difference between the first 2 and the third is that the last type of friendship, friendships of virtue, actually exist for the good of the other. Think about it. The first 2 are what I'll call selfish, not necessarily in a bad way, but selfish in the sense that the main reason we have them is that they help us and they make us feel good. But see, friendships of virtue exist to lead the other person to a more virtuous life, a better life. There's a big difference. In fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church defines love like this. To love is to will the good of the other. Think about that. To love is to will the good of the other. So real love isn't what we usually see in a music video or a movie. It's not a selfish love, it's a selfless love. In our lives, I think most of our relationships are really based more on what we get. We think of friendships much more in terms of what's in it for me, even some of the people we believe we love and that we believe love us. Listen, I've counseled a lot of young people who gave everything they had to a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but in the end, that person wasn't wanting what was best for them. In the end, you know what they were really saying is, hey, make me feel good. Listen, our Catholic Church actually teaches that we are most fully human when we're making a gift of ourselves to others. In our hearts, we know that's true. Just think of any time, even something small. You woke up an hour early to help your friend get to swim practice in the morning because his car broke down. We know in those moments that there's something about when we give a gift of ourselves to others. My friend Jim was leading a discipleship group just like yours, and they were talking about this exact point when one of the guys in the group took a look at this and just thought about it. And he slammed his hand down on the table and said, "You know what, Jim? If this is really true, then I'm not sure I've ever had one real friend in my whole life." You know, the thing is, I think if we're really honest with ourselves, that's probably true for many more of us than we realize. Let me tell you a story about my son. 3 years ago, we moved our family from Colorado to Texas. My son had just started his sophomore year when we moved, and he just really had a tough go of it. It's a very hard time to move away from home, and he was now going to a huge public school, over 800 kids just in the sophomore class. I watched him put his whole effort into making it work, and every afternoon I'd pick him up from school, hopeful. "Hey, how'd it go today?" And, it started out all right. He was like, "Hey, it was all right," which became, "Well, it was all right." Then one day I picked him up and said, "How's it going?" And he said, "Oh, all right, I guess." And I could just see it in his eyes. I was heartbroken for him. He had tried his best. It was not working. And I'm the one that decided to move him. I'm the one that put the family halfway across the country. It was tough for me to watch him struggle. So one day he hops into the car, and I could just tell something was different. A little extra skip in his step, and I hadn't seen that since we lived in Colorado. I didn't ask him what was up. I didn't want to force him. That's where moms and dads are different. Moms have no patience. Dads can wait for it to come out, but that's another video. So finally, he told me, "Hey, Dad, the guys are going out to a movie tonight, and they wanted to know if I would come." The guys are the baseball team because he's a baseball player. So he asked me, "If it's okay with you, I think I'll go with them." And I'm like, "Okay with me? Heck yeah, it's okay with me." I mean, I stayed calm on the outside, but on the inside, I'm doing the happy dance. Like, we got friends. I'm saying we, it's not even me. So it's 2 hours later. We're headed out the door to the movies, and I can see something's on his mind. And he says, "Well, Dad, Jack just called." Now, Jack's not part of the baseball team. He's this one kid we know in town. He doesn't actually even live in town. He lives 30 minutes away, but we'd go get him once in a while. And he was having a pretty tough time at home. And things were a little chaotic, and his parents were splitting up, and sometimes he just escaped to our house. And so he said, "Jack's wondering if he can spend the night here tonight." Well, I don't know. I didn't know what to say. It's been a kind of a long, lonely time, right? So I just said, "Well, what'd you tell him?" And he said, "Well, I told him I'd call him after the movie." And I said, "All right, there you go." So we get in the car and we head out to the movies. We get to the stop sign right at the end of our street. And he says, no, Dad, let's go get Jack." I mean, I'm the adult in the story, right? But I cared a lot about Jack, but I cared a lot about my son too. And it's been a tough road since we moved. So I just said, "Hey, are you sure about that?" And he said, yeah, Dad, I'm sure. It's the right thing." Looking back now, I'm so proud of that decision. And I'll tell you something I know 2 years later. I know that there is not one kid on that baseball team that will ever remember 2 years later whether my son went to that movie or not. But there's one kid that will never forget that his friend came to get him when he needed it. Listen, my son is a very normal teen, very regular kid. I think he had a 56 in geometry at the time. That's not a joke. It's like triangle, right? But that day, he had heroic virtue to put himself second and will the good of the other. That's the kind of friend we want to surround ourselves with, right? And more importantly, that's the kind of friends we're called to be. And if you walk away just thinking, "Hey, your son's a great guy," you're missing the point. In a very real way, we are all called to be just like that. And in a very real way, my son needed to go help Jack that day. Because just like we said earlier, he's the most fully human when he's making a gift of himself to others, or in the exact words of the church, man only discovers himself in the sincere gift of himself. You want to know the easiest and best way to find friends like that? It's very simple. Be a friend like that. We have the greatest example in the world of how to do that, and his name is Jesus Christ. I want you guys to take a minute in your group and read what Jesus says about friendship. You just took some time now to look closer at that passage from John. I think it's kind of mind-blowing if you think about it, that Jesus, who is God, called the disciples, who were just regular people like you and me, his friends. He loved them. And in this passage, even though the disciples did not realize what was about to happen, Jesus was saying a true friend will lay down his life for the people he loves. And Jesus did know when he was saying that he was going to do that very thing the next day. In dying on the cross, Jesus gave us the ultimate model of friendship, sacrificing his life for the good of others. And in the end, the disciples showed the very same love for Jesus. They all could have saved their own lives by simply denying that Christ was alive, denying that they saw him rise from the dead. But they chose to be martyred in truly horrible ways rather than to deny Jesus, because they did not just see Jesus as some far distant God. They saw Jesus as a friend. The radical part of Christianity is that Jesus wants that kind of friendship with each one of us too. When we open our hearts to a relationship with the one who is the ultimate model of true friendship, we are also formed into that kind of friend. That's the real secret here. In our friendship with Jesus, we become virtuous friends ourselves. And as we become virtuous friends, we begin to find virtuous friends, the kind you want around when the chips are down. So the last question, I bet you thought I forgot, or I bet you forgot. The first question was, who are your friends? Second question, why did you choose them? The third question, do your friends lead you closer to God or further away from God? And that's a tough question, mainly, I think, because it forces us to look at some tough answers. The truth is, if you've never really thought about any of this before, you might be realizing right now that you have a lot of friends of utility and a lot of friends of pleasure, but not very many friends of virtue. And you know what? That's okay for now. Don't panic. But I do think we need to begin to think, what does a true friend look like? St. Augustine, a great theologian, bishop, and doctor of the church, said true friendship requires three things. The necessity of virtue, which is kind of what we've been talking about, right? A desire to lead each other closer to God and to be friends that desire and will the good of the other. That day in the car, my son was a virtuous friend. It's not as hard as all that you think, right? You don't have to walk around at school tomorrow handing out Bibles, wearing a brown robe to be virtuous. That's not virtuous. That's just weird, right? God desires that we open our eyes to the opportunities around us to grow closer to him in the simple ways. That's being holy and that's being virtuous. The second thing St. Augustine names is frankness of speech. And again, this does not mean being rude, right? Frankness of speech doesn't mean a girl tells her best friend, oh, you look so fat in that dress. That's just mean. That's what that is. Frankness of speech does mean, though, being honest and being real about important things. It means being willing to tell your friend when what they're doing is hurting them. It's being unafraid to hold each other accountable to the virtues that we're trying to live by. Honestly, there is no way I could live a holy life if I didn't surround myself with other people who were trying to live it too. I have 3 friends right now that I know I could pick up the phone and call them and say, I can't explain to you what's going on, but I need you here tomorrow. And they would get on a plane and fly to me. They know my struggles and they know how to hold me accountable to the things that I need friends to hold me accountable to. We all need friends who are not afraid to say the truth, who are not afraid to say, hey, don't go over there tonight. There's going to be nothing but trouble. Let's hang out here. That's the kind of thing that frankness of speech means. Finally, St. Augustine names unity of heart and mind as the third quality of friendship. I like this one. It means that we're united in our desire to love God. That's bigger than being united in the desire to win a game or go to state or even to do the right thing. It means we intentionally choose to grow closer to God in our relationship. St. Augustine even says that in true friends, he learns to love the love of God. And what he's saying is he begins to see God's love for him in the love of that other person. I bet you can think of at least one time in your life, maybe when something really tough was going on, and a friend was there for you in that moment, and something happened in that moment. In their eyes, you saw something bigger than just their concern for you, but you also felt a presence that was God's love for you. Well, believe it or not, that is not supposed to be a rare occurrence. When we find true friends that share with us a passion to put God first, and when we become that kind of friend that wills the good of the other before even our own, we'll begin to see that Christ is present in those relationships. So that's the last thing I'll say. We all need friends like that. And in this discipleship group, you're being given the chance to be that kind of friend for each other. And you're being given the chance to find friends that will desire your good, even above their own. And you're being given the chance to be that kind of friend. And when we do that, we become a little bit of a reflection of God's love to others. And that has a lasting impact on them and on us. So listen, I know this group is new to you, pretty new, right? And for whatever it's worth, I want you to know that I encourage you to make this group more than just something on your list of things to do. Show up to it. Be faithful. Be real. Don't be afraid to share who you really are and be a person worth trusting to the other people in your group. This can be a great place where you learn to find and make true friends, friends that lead you closer to Christ. And in the end, that is the ultimate goal of our life. I'm praying for you guys.